I can be really clear with you that there was no UK involvement in this operation, and obviously we're working in relation to British citizens. I've got 2 daughters, Patrick, and I've never been so scared of the future of Britain. You know, I'm actively trying to see how maybe I can get out. I'm petrified for future of my kids, especially my 2 girls. I'm pretty confident that if I left the studio now and went and randomly attacked 3 women, abuse them, call them prostitutes and other names, that I would be arrested and I would expect to go to prison. Now, the fact that that hasn't happened is worrying to me. Again, I think we're seeing 2-tier policing, 2-tier justice, and we got a 2-tier prime minister in this country and a 2-tier media, the way things are treated. The British Parliament has just exploded into absolute chaos. Keir Starmer is facing the most dangerous political moment of his entire career, as furious MPs from across the political spectrum are now demanding his head on a platter. The Prime Minister who promised to fix Britain has just been accused of committing the ultimate betrayal against 17 million voters who trusted him with their future. What's happening right now inside Westminster is so explosive that political experts are saying this could be the beginning of the end for Starr's government. The establishment doesn't want you to know the full truth about what's really going on behind those closed doors. But we're going to expose everything. What you're about to hear will fundamentally change how you see British politics forever. The consequences of this moment are so terrifying that even senior Labour MPs are privately admitting they've never seen anything like this before. This is your country. This is your democracy. This is your future. The situation inside 10 Downing Street right now is absolutely explosive. Sources close to the Prime Minister reveal that Keir Starmer is in a state of complete fury. As accusations of Brexit betrayal sweep through the corridors of Westminster like wildfire, this isn't just another political disagreement between rival parties. This is a full-scale revolt that threatens to bring down an entire government just 18 months after Labour won its historic landslide victory. The timing couldn't be worse for a Prime Minister who is already facing the worst approval ratings of any leader at this stage in office. Reform UK is now leading Labour in almost every major opinion poll. Nigel Farage is being talked about as a potential future Prime Minister, and now Starmer's own party members are turning against him in ways that nobody predicted would happen this fast. The trigger for this political earthquake was Starmer's controversial decision to push Britain closer to the European Union through a series of deals that critics are calling a complete reversal of everything Brexit was supposed to deliver. Just yesterday, in an interview with the BBC, Starmer openly declared that he wants even closer alignment with the EU single market. He said it's in Britain's national interest to go further with Brussels. These words sent shock waves through Westminster because they confirm what millions of Brexit voters have feared all along. The man who once campaigned for a second referendum to overturn Brexit is now systematically dismantling everything that 17 million people voted for in 2016. Shadow Foreign Secretary Priti Patel immediately launched a devastating attack on the Prime Minister. She declared that Labour's Brexit betrayal is becoming clearer by the day. She accused Starmer of pursuing alignment with the single market in a desperate bid to appease his own rebellious backbench. She said he is surrendering Britain's freedom to cut regulations and strike independent trade deals. These are not minor criticisms from a backbench politician looking for attention. This is Conservative Party's top foreign affairs voice, declaring open war on Starmer's entire approach to Europe. The message is crystal clear. The Conservatives believe Starmer is trying to undo the democratic decision of the British people through backdoor bureaucratic manipulation. But here's where things get truly explosive. The rebellion isn't just coming from the opposition benches. It's erupting from inside Starr's own Labour Party. 13 Labour MPs have already voted in favor of proposals that would pave the way for Britain to rejoin the EU customs union. This directly contradicts Labour's own manifesto promises. Senior Labour figures are warning that this internal revolt risks sparking a civil war within the party. Some MPs have openly told journalists that voting for closer EU ties would be electoral suicide in the so-called Red Wall, constituencies where Reform UK is breathing down their necks. These are seats that Labour desperately needs to hold if it wants any chance of surviving the next general election. The specific details of what Starmer has agreed with Brussels are causing massive fury among those who understand the implications. Britain has handed EU fishing boats access to UK waters for the next 12 years until 2038. This was supposed to be temporary access that would expire in 2026. Instead of taking back control of British fishing waters as Brexit promised, Starmer extended EU access for over a decade. The fishing industry is absolutely devastated. Federation leaders have called this a disastrous outcome and accused the Prime Minister of making the whole deal on the backs of fishermen and coastal communities. One furious fisherman from Cornwall told reporters this is a total betrayal. He said they were promised their waters back, and now Starmer has rolled over and handed them straight to the French for more than a decade. But the fishing rights betrayal is just the beginning of what critics are calling a complete surrender to Brussels. The deal also includes something called a sanitary and phytosanitary agreement. In plain English, this means Britain has agreed to align its food and agriculture standards with EU regulations. The European Court of Justice will now have jurisdiction over these matters. Think about what this means. British courts will no longer have the final say on food standards affecting British farmers and British consumers. Brussels bureaucrats and European judges will be making decisions that affect what British people eat and how British farmers operate. This is exactly what Brexit was supposed to end, and Starmer has brought it back to the front door while pretending it's something else entirely. The political calculation behind these moves is becoming clearer as more information emerges. Starmer and his advisors apparently believe that by slowly rebuilding ties with Brussels, they can eventually present voters with a done deal that cannot be reversed. They're betting that people will forget what Brexit was supposed to mean. They're gambling that economic arguments will eventually outweigh democratic principles. But this strategy has spectacularly backfired because the British public is not as stupid as Starmer seems to think. People remember what they voted for. They remember being told that Brexit means Brexit. They remember being promised that leaving the EU would mean taking back control of laws, borders, and money, and they can see with their own eyes that Starmer is systematically reversing every single one of those promises. The fury among Brexit supporters is now reaching dangerous levels. Reform UK leader Nigel Farage has seized on this moment with devastating effectiveness. He's telling voters that Starmer is proving everything he warned about during the Brexit campaign. He's saying that the political establishment never accepted the referendum result and has been plotting to reverse it ever since. Farage's party is now projected to win over 380 seats at the next general election, according to recent polling. Meanwhile, Labour would collapse to just 85 seats, losing over 300 members of Parliament. These numbers are absolutely catastrophic for Starr. They suggest that his Brexit betrayal isn't just angering voters. It's potentially destroying the entire Labour Party as a viable political force. Inside Downing Street, there are now serious discussions about whether Starmer can survive the coming months. Bloomberg has reported that Starmer's rivals within Labour are positioning themselves for a potential leadership challenge. Health Secretary Wes Streeting is being talked about as a potential replacement. Some Labour MPs and aides have privately told journalists that Strang could miss his window of opportunity if he doesn't make a move before the local elections in May. The message is clear. Even Starmer's own colleagues don't believe he can lead the party into the next general election. They're already planning for his departure while publicly pretending everything is fine. But what makes the situation even more explosive is the constitutional dimension. Britain operates on an unwritten constitution based on parliamentary sovereignty and democratic conventions. When a prime minister makes major policy decisions without consulting Parliament or the electorate, it strikes at the very foundation of how British democracy is supposed to function. MPs aren't just angry about the specific Brexit-related issues. They're furious about the president this sets for executive power. If a prime minister can secretly negotiate away sovereignty without proper parliamentary oversight, what else can be done in secret? This is why MPs from across the political spectrum are demanding accountability. It's no longer just about Brexit. It's about defending the basic principles of democratic government against a leader who seems to believe he can do whatever he wants without facing consequences. The question now is whether Starmer can survive this political firestorm or whether the pressure will become too intense for even his most loyal supporters to bear. With Reform UK surging in the polls, with his own MPs openly rebelling, with the fishing industry calling him a traitor, and with constitutional experts warning about executive overreach, Starmer is facing attacks from every possible direction simultaneously. His government that looked so dominant just 18 months ago now appears to be crumbling before our eyes. The local elections in May will be the first major test of whether voters are willing to punish Labour for what critics are calling the greatest political betrayal in modern British history. But here's the question that nobody in Westminster wants to answer openly. If Starmer's own cabinet cannot agree on who should replace him, and if Labour MPs are too divided to mount a unified challenge, then what happens next? Does Star simply limp on towards electoral disaster while Reform UK grows stronger every single day, or does someone find the courage to end this nightmare before it's too late? The answer to that question will determine the future of British politics for a generation, and right now nobody seems to know what that answer will be. The scale of rebellion inside the Labour Party right now is something Westminster has never witnessed before. This isn't just a handful of troublemakers looking for media attention. More than 130 Labour MPs have now signaled their opposition to various aspects of Star's agenda. Over 120 MPs signed a recent amendment trying to block the government's welfare reform bill. 42 MPs wrote directly to the Prime Minister warning that his policies are impossible to support. 13 Labour MPs have openly voted against their own government on the customs union question. These numbers represent more than a quarter of the entire Parliamentary Labour Party in open revolt against their leader. The situation is so serious that some MPs are privately telling journalists this could end with Starmer being forced out as leader just 18 months into his premiership. But the Brexit betrayal is what has truly set the political world on fire. When Starmer announced that he is pursuing a youth mobility scheme with the European Union, Brexit supporters immediately recognized what this really means. The government claims this isn't freedom of movement. They say it's just a scheme for young people to travel and work in Europe. But critics have exposed the terrifying truth behind these innocent-sounding words. Analysis has revealed that up to 64 million EU residents would potentially become eligible to move to the United Kingdom under the scheme. That's not a typo. 64 million people from across the European Union aged between 18 and 30 could theoretically gain the right to live and work in Britain. Brussels has been pushing for no caps on this arrangement, no limits on how many people can come, no restrictions on how long they can stay. This is freedom of movement through the back door, and everyone knows it. Reform UK MP Lee Anderson has called this out in the most direct terms possible. He declared that letting in hundreds of thousands more EU migrants would directly defy the wishes of the British people. He reminded everyone that the country voted for Brexit and won despite the Conservatives' failure to deliver properly. He accused the Labour government of selling out Brexit by leaning back on the EU and allowing free movement through the back door. These aren't wild accusations from the political fringe. This is a sitting member of Parliament stating publicly that the government is betraying the democratic will of the British people. And he's absolutely right. The youth mobility scheme is exactly the kind of bureaucratic manipulation that Brexit was supposed to end forever. But here's where things get truly explosive. Of Dominic Cummings, the mastermind behind the original Brexit victory, has just blown the lid off what he calls an establishment plot to destroy Nigel Farage and prevent Reform UK from ever winning power. Speaking on a major political podcast, Cummings issued a chilling warning that sent shockwaves through Westminster. He revealed that Whitehall officials and people close to Starr are planning to use any means necessary to stop Farage. And when he says any means necessary, he means exactly that. Cummings claimed they will leak medical records. They will leak tax records. They will bug phones and leak private conversations. They will break the law if that's what it takes to prevent Reform from winning the next general election. Think about what Cummings is saying here. This is the man who ran the Vote Leave campaign. This is someone who worked at the highest levels of government as Boris Johnson's chief advisor. He knows exactly how the establishment operates because he was inside it, and he's warning the British public that democratic processes mean nothing to these people. They view the Brexit referendum as a disaster that should never have been allowed to happen. They look at what happened with Donald Trump in America, and they're terrified the same thing could happen here. Their solution is to strike early and strike hard against anyone who threatens their grip on power. Cummings specifically said their goal is to smash Farage and make sure he doesn't win by fair means or foul. Reform UK Chairman Zia Yusuf responded to these revelations with just two chilling words. He said it's already begun. Those words should terrify every British citizen who believes in democracy. If what Cummings and Yusuf are saying is true, then the political establishment is actively working to subvert the will of the people before they even get a chance to vote. This isn't some conspiracy theory from the dark corners of the internet. This is coming from people who have been inside the system and seen how it operates. Former Starmer aide Paul Ovnan has made similar claims about civil servants hijacking government and pursuing their own agenda regardless of what voters want. The picture emerging is one of a permanent ruling class that will do anything to maintain control. The timing of these revelations could not be more damaging for Starr. His government is already facing attacks from every direction. The fishing industry is furious about the 12-year surrender of British waters. Brexit supporters are outraged about the European Court of Justice being given jurisdiction over British food standards. Immigration hawks are terrified about the youth mobility scheme opening the floodgates to millions of Europeans. And now his own MPs are in open revolt over welfare cuts that will push 250,000 people into poverty. According to the government's own impact assessment, the Prime Minister, who promised change and hope, is delivering nothing but broken promises and bureaucratic betrayal. The internal warfare inside Labour has reached levels that veteran political observers describe as unprecedented. Health Secretary Wes Streeting has been publicly contradicting the Prime Minister on EU policy. He said a customs union would have enormous economic benefits just days before Starmer ruled it out. Political insiders see this as a direct leadership challenge. Bloomberg has reported that Streeting could miss his window of opportunity to replace Starr if he doesn't make a move before the May local elections. The message is clear. Even cabinet ministers don't believe Starmer can lead Labour to victory. They're positioning themselves for his departure while publicly pretending to support him. Greater Manchester Mayor Andy Burnham has also emerged as a potential challenger. He publicly criticized the government's welfare reforms as the wrong choice. He accused ministers of targeting the most vulnerable people in society. For a mayor who was once a senior cabinet minister to openly attack his own party's government suggests the rebellion goes all the way to the top of Labour politics. The knives are out for Starr, and everyone in Westminster knows it. The only question is whether someone will have the courage to strike before the local elections deliver what many predict will be a catastrophic defeat. The Conservative Party is trying to capitalize on this chaos, but they have their own credibility problems. Shadow Foreign Secretary Priti Patel has been hammering Starr on the Brexit betrayal. She accused him of surrendering British freedom in a desperate bid to appease his backbench. She called the pursuit of single market alignment a complete reversal of what the British people Voted for. Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch has accused Starmer of selling fishermen men down the river. She asked why the Prime Minister is willing to give away British sovereignty for nothing in return. But the Conservatives themselves failed to deliver proper Brexit during their 14 years in power. Voters remember that. And that's why Reform UK is now leading in almost every major opinion poll. The polling numbers tell a story of complete political realignment in Britain. Reform UK is now projected to win over 380 seats at the next general election. Labour would collapse to just 85 seats. The Conservatives would fall to around 70 seats. These numbers would represent the most dramatic shift in British political history since universal suffrage. Nigel Farage would become Prime Minister with a commanding majority. The entire political establishment that has governed Britain for decades would be swept away. And this is exactly why Cummings believes they will resort to any tactics necessary to prevent this outcome. The stakes could not be higher for everyone involved. Farage himself has set his sights on the May 2026 local elections as the springboard to power. He declared that if Reform gets this right on May 7th, they will go on and win the general election. He is planning to deploy millions of pounds targeting voters who didn't participate in the last election. His strategy is to mobilize the disengaged and the disillusioned, the people who have given up on politics because they feel ignored by the establishment, the people who voted for Brexit and watched politicians try to reverse it, the people who are struggling with the cost of living, while government seems to care only about appeasing Brussels. These are the voters who could reshape British politics forever if they turn out for reform. But Starmer is gambling that he can survive long enough to turn things around. In his BC interview, he insisted he would still be Prime Minister next year. He warned that removing him would create utter chaos and hand power to Farage. He compared any potential leadership challenge to the constant chopping and changing that destroyed the Conservative Party. He's essentially telling his own MPs that they have no choice but to stick with him regardless of how badly things are going. This is the argument of a leader who has run out of positive reasons for people to support him. He's not promising success. He's just warning that the alternative would be worse. The constitutional implications of what's happening extend far beyond any single policy dispute. Britain's unwritten constitution depends on conventions and good faith. When a prime minister negotiates major changes to the country's relationship with Europe without proper parliamentary scrutiny, it undermines the entire system. When cabinet ministers publicly contradict a leader on fundamental policy questions, it suggests collective responsibility has collapsed. When over 100 MPs rebel against their own government on flagship legislation, it shows the parliamentary system is breaking down. We're witnessing something that goes beyond normal political disagreement. We're watching the foundations of British governance shake under pressure they were never designed to withstand. The European Union is watching all of this with considerable interest and some alarm. EU officials secured everything they wanted from Starmer: 12 years of fishing access, jurisdiction for European courts, over food standards, a youth mobility scheme that could restore freedom of movement in practice. But if Starmer falls and reform takes power, all of these gains will be reversed overnight. Farage has made clear he would tear up any deal that betrays Brexit. A reform government would likely pursue the hardest possible separation from Brussels. The EU's gamble on Starmer delivering alignment could backfire spectacularly if it contributes to his political destruction. The situation Britain faces right now is unlike anything in modern political history. A prime minister who promised integrity and honesty is fighting for political survival amid accusations of the worst kind of deception. His own MPs are in open revolt. His cabinet ministers are positioning themselves to replace him. The opposition is unified in demanding accountability. And millions of voters who trusted the democratic process are watching in horror as their mandate is systematically dismantled by bureaucratic manipulation. The question everyone is asking is simple: what happens next? And the answer to that Question will determine the future of British democracy itself. The May 2026 local elections will be the first major test of whether Starmer can survive this crisis. Political analysts are predicting catastrophic losses for Labour across England, Scotland, and Wales. Reform UK is expected to make unprecedented gains in areas that were once considered safe Labour territory. The red wall constituencies that switched from Conservative to Labour in recent elections are now showing massive swings toward Farage's party. If these predictions prove accurate, the pressure on Starmer to resign will become overwhelming. Even his most loyal supporters will struggle to defend a leader who has led the party to historic defeat while simultaneously betraying the core promise that brought 17 million people to the polls in 2016. But here's what the establishment doesn't want you to understand. This crisis isn't just about one prime minister or one political party. This is about something much bigger and much more important. This is about whether the British people have any real say in how their country is governed. This is about whether democracy means anything when politicians can simply ignore referendum results they don't like. This is about whether sovereignty belongs to the people or to an unelected bureaucratic class that believes it knows better than ordinary citizens. The Brexit betrayal isn't just a policy dispute. It's a fundamental attack on the principle that government derives its legitimacy from the consent of the governed. The solution to this crisis is clear, and it starts with the British people demanding accountability. Every citizen who voted for Brexit needs to understand what is being done in their name. They need to contact their member of parliament and demand answers about why the government is surrendering fishing rights to European boats for 12 years. They need to ask why the European Court of Justice is being given jurisdiction over British food standards. They need to challenge the youth mobility scheme that critics say will open the door to millions of EU migrants. These aren't complicated questions. They're basic democratic accountability that every elected representative owes to their constituents. The second part of the solution is supporting political movements that genuinely represent the will of the people. Reform UK has emerged as the only major party that consistently defends a Brexit mandate. We're witnessing something that goes beyond normal political disagreement. We're watching the foundations of British governance shake under pressure they were never designed to withstand. The European Union is watching all of this with considerable interest and some alarm. EU officials secured everything they wanted from Starmer: 12 years of fishing access, jurisdiction for European courts, over food standards, a youth mobility scheme that could restore freedom of movement in practice. But if Starmer falls and reform takes power, all of these gains could be reversed overnight. Farage has made clear he would tear up any deal that betrays Brexit. A reform government would likely pursue the hardest possible separation from Brussels. The EU's gamble on Starmer delivering alignment could backfire spectacularly if it contributes to his political destruction. The situation Britain faces right now is unlike anything in modern political history. A prime minister who promised integrity and honesty is fighting for his political survival amid accusations of the worst kind of deception. His own MPs are in open revolt. His cabinet ministers are positioning themselves to replace him. The opposition is unified in demanding accountability, and millions of voters who trusted the democratic process are watching in horror as their mandate is systematically dismantled by bureaucratic manipulation. The question everyone is asking is simple: what happens next? And the answer to that question will determine the future of British democracy itself. The May 2026 local elections will be the first major test of whether Starmer can survive this crisis. Political analysts are predicting catastrophic losses for Labour across England, Scotland, and Wales. Reform UK is expected to make unprecedented gains in areas that were once considered safe Labour territory. The red wall constituencies that switched from Conservative to Labour in recent elections are now showing massive swings toward Farage's party. If these predictions prove accurate, the pressure on Starmer to resign will become overwhelming. Even his most loyal supporters will struggle to defend a leader who has led the party to historic defeat while simultaneously betraying the core promise that brought 17 million people to the polls in 2016. But here's what the establishment doesn't want you to understand. This crisis isn't just about one prime minister or one political party. This is about something much bigger and much more important. This is about whether the British people have any real say in how their country is governed. This is about whether democracy means anything when politicians can simply ignore referendum results they don't like. This is about whether sovereignty belongs to the people or to an unelected bureaucratic class that believes it knows better than ordinary citizens. The Brexit betrayal isn't just a policy dispute. It's a fundamental attack on the principle that government derives its legitimacy from consent of the governed. The solution to this crisis is clear, and it starts with the British people demanding accountability. Every citizen who voted for Brexit needs to understand what is being done in their name. They need to contact their member of parliament and demand answers about why the government is surrendering fishing rights to European boats for 12 years. They need to ask why the European Court of Justice is being given jurisdiction over British food standards. They need to challenge the youth mobility scheme that critics say will open the door to millions of EU migrants. These aren't complicated questions. They're basic democratic accountability that every elected representative owes to their constituents. The second part of the solution is supporting political movements that genuinely represent the will of the people. Reform UK has emerged as the only major party that consistently defends the Brexit mandate.